Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first TechTalk Dudes session. I'm Pim Jacobs. I'm a Microsoft MVP with a strong focus on identity, working in Spark as a consultant, and that's me.
Yeah, folks, I'm Ronny de Jong, also from the Netherlands, Microsoft MVP on modern management, enterprise mobility. This session we are actually is the first of hopefully many podcasts. Welcome to the TechTalk Dudes. Pim and I are two technical dudes. We are actually day-to-day working on the Microsoft 365. Pim is involved in identity. My main focus is on management of the modern workplace. And yeah, based on various articles, Pim will mostly focus on identity. I will more focus on the topics of modern management. We want to share our experiences from the field, sharing new things, new solutions with you. And this session we are talking about identity governance. So I'm interested, Pim. What is identity governance? Can you tell a bit more about it?
Of course, Ronnie. It's a very good question. I think some of you, the people who listen, already know Azure AD Identity Governance as the product name, as it's residing in Azure AD. But Azure AD Identity Governance is much more than just that product. It starts actually with building a strong identity foundation, so making sure all the identities are provisioned within Azure Active Directory, preferably, of course, via an HR process, making sure that HR is the source of truth. And from there, you can start the provisioning, preferably from Azure AD to other third-party applications like Salesforce or Topdesk or other products. And from that point forward, your identity baseline is right, it's correct. But then it starts, of course, because then the people start working, they need permissions, and all those times you see that people are requesting more and more permissions. They maybe switch roles, and then they keep having that same permission. And an access package or an access review, or actually the product identity governance in there, can help you get back into control. And that's purely for looking at your end user estate. Identity governance includes also ways to monitor the lifecycle for guest users. These days, with the COVID situation which we're all living in, you see that we work more remote. You get invited into lots of other environments, which results in having guests in maybe more tenants, but you are actually never challenged if you still need that permission which you got maybe 1 year ago. And that's actually what identity governance is all about.
Yeah, actually, it's kind of exploding because it's so easily to collaborate by using external identities, whether it's B2B or B2C scenarios, like Teams, for example, what you mentioned. We're working virtually within Teams. You were invited to collaborate with a new project, but that's a fair point, Pim. Who is taking the responsibility and who is keeping up with those access once the project is finished? Are those accounts, are they removed? Are they cleaned? Who's taking responsibility for that? I'm not unenrolling myself within organization, and mostly I'm not able to do so. I think that's an interesting point, and it's also introduced by the way of working these days why identity lifecycle management and the governance in general is becoming more relevant.
Yeah, exactly.
And I believe it's also the same with the typical processes like the joiner, but particularly the mover or the leaver process with your own employees, not only guest users, but your employees or your contractors, for example, when they are terminated or rehired. Exactly. How you cope with that?
Yeah, exactly. So maybe it's helpful. I did prepare some slides. I can pop them up on the screen, Ronnie. Maybe that.
I think that's interesting. Yeah, sure.
Okay, let me pop them up. Let me know if you can see the screen.
Very clear. Yes, I can see them.
Okay, perfect. So this is the first slide. And basically this is all already explaining what identity governance offers you for what solutions it will bring you. So it's all about identity lifecycle, as you just mentioned, joiner, mover, leaver process for your own employees, but as well as the guest which you have in your tenant. Thinking about access lifecycle. So when switching roles, do you still need that access? Maybe you switch roles from jobs within the same company. You get a totally different role than the previous access rights. They don't apply anymore. They can be removed, but no one is removing them. And the other part is privileged identity management, and that's has more the focus on who has the access rights to manage your tenant. So more from an administrative perspective.
Yeah. It's kind of how you say that separation of duty and split token access. Indeed, that you're not only you might have the global administrator role, but you're not having that permissions permanently.
Exactly, just in time, just enough rights to do that thing you need to do as an administrator.
Yeah, and it's auditable, it's traceable, all the
Yeah, correct, and then. It all applies with making it secure, but on the other hand, also productive, because if your users if the productivity of users lowers down, then that's not what you want as an administrator. It's finding the right balance between security and productivity, and making sure that the right controls are in place, and that's actually what identity governance is all about. But at first, as I already mentioned previously, it's by making sure that the baseline which you configure is correct. So starting with a strong identity foundation. As I always say, people are not building a house without a foundation. So let's also not build an IT environment without a foundation, because that simply will collapse sometime.
I'm not that sure, Pim. I'm sure there are examples they are building the house without a foundation, but that's all the consequences.
Yeah, exactly. Not very helpful, I think. So building a strong foundation is the first step which you need to focus on, and I summarize this in 4 simple points. Making sure that all identities are connected to the Azure AD. At least use MFA. Please start. If you don't use MFA today, please go and start use multi-factor authentication, because it reduces the risk of identity theft with more than 90%. So if you're not using it today, please start doing it to make sure you're protected. On the other hand, it's important to reduce administrator accounts. Besides the fact that administrator accounts should always be protected with MFA, there is only one rule when you don't protect them, and that's when you're using a break the glass account. But making sure you have as less admins as possible, and don't over apply admin rights. If people just need access for Exchange as an administrator, just give them that access. Don't make them a global administrator just because it's helpful. And on the other hand, an important step, and that's what you can do to apply MFA, is of course implement conditional access. It's a very powerful tool. To also give you some more details about what conditional access actually is. Basically, the word already says it. It's access based on specific conditions. So if you are a specific user, if you are going to connect to a specific app, or if you're coming from a specific device, then I have controls like force a password reset, require MFA, making sure that the device is registered within your tenant. Now, all that kind of controls are in place, and after that I can say I apply the access. I grant you access because you've met all the conditions. If you don't meet the conditions, the authentication will simply stop, and it will disconnect, or it will disconnect you. It will pop up. It will show you a message. You're not allowed to log in. So that's all about the stuff of building a strong identity foundation, and that's step one. Once that's in place, as I already mentioned before, it's important to make sure that the joiner, mover, leaver lifecycle is in place, and this is for a new employee which is onboarding, or a new guest user which is onboarding, or the employee which leaves the company, or the employee which switch roles, as I just mentioned. Basically, you make HR the source of truth in this case, where people in HR are mostly the first to know that a new user is joining the organization. They fill in their details in the HR system, and then an action is triggered to say, hey, I see a new user, let's add that to the Azure AD or the Active Directory in this case, if you're using a hybrid scenario. And from there, the user is then filled with the correct details, like the correct job title, the correct department name, the right company if you're having more companies within the same organization, etc., etc., etc. And HR is also leading in that case. Now, this is for the joiner process. The thing which is, of course, most important is when someone leaves the company, that the account is also disabled, meaning in HR they will set an expiry date on the account, and after that account will be also disabled within Active Directory or within Azure Active Directory, just what the sources of the account. And this will help you to get back into control about all those accounts. I see during work, I see lots of organizations still struggle with this because HR doesn't tell IT that the user has left the company. IT has to find out that the user has left the company. It's making it the other way around. While we just want to make sure that HR is actually not even telling IT this user has left the company, just making sure that's in the system as it should be, and that then an action is applied on the IT systems. Yeah, that's it. That's also important why you connect those HR systems to your AD or Azure AD, that you're automating that identity lifecycle process, because you don't want to keep it manually, or what you're mentioning by doing it by email or something else. That's error prone. Can you give us some examples with if
how the connector framework is look like and which HR systems are currently supported by today?
Yes, I can. So today, SAP SuccessFactors and Workday are the ones which are supported out of the box from the Azure AD. So that's by default, as in today, possible. I expect that there are more coming. And I noticed that Microsoft has made an announcement with a third-party tool. I need to come back to the name, Ronny, because I don't know it. Which also supports that provisioning from HR via that third-party tool to Azure AD or to Active Directory. So about 10 HR tools are currently, as in today, possible with Azure AD experience. And then you have the choice to provision directly into Azure AD or into Active Directory. That's still an option. As unfortunately there are just 10. The one which I see is the most used tool at least in the Benelux, because that's where I'm working, is AFAS, and that's unfortunately still not on the list.
Yeah. It's just a matter of time to get more HR systems into the ecosystem and supporting this identity lifecycle scenarios. And it's actually key. The more in larger enterprises, you don't want to do that manually. It should be automated bidirectionally. So yeah, it's very powerful what I experienced so far.
Yeah, exactly. If it's implemented with the right tool set, it can bring you so much more in terms of automation and even not even touching the security bit, where accounts will stay open when that email got stuck in someone's mailbox with please disable this account.
Yeah.
Because the user has left the company.
Yeah, that's actually a recipient for bringing your own disaster from an identity perspective. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, that's true. I noticed myself recently. We were facing a colleague who was leaving the company, and then I noticed in the test environment the account was still there because there is no lifecycle or governance around it. So yeah, I think most people will recognize this typical scenario.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so.
Yeah.
But then when this is right and you've implemented this for your employees, there is also a bit which you need to do for your guests, because it's this is a process which is driven with via HR tooling, and your guests, the people who are self-employed for a different company, are not in your system. So it's also important to look at the part for guests, and that can be done with access reviews. I will come back to that later on. It's on this list, but it falls beneath a different identity governance topic. So I will discuss that later on.
Yeah. Perhaps you can also explain us about. We're now talking about the lifecycle and why it's that important, but it's not only limited to your on-premise Active Directory or your applications on-prem, but I believe it's also going forward to your SaaS applications, which are also federated with your Azure AD, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's a very good point, Ronny. This picture describes it very high level, but basically it says once we have finished that HR process where the accounts are provisioned and HR is the source of truth, then the next step is, of course, to make sure that the source of truth which is applied within Active Directory and Azure Active Directory is also the source of truth applied within the applications. So that can be Salesforce, DocuSign, Box, or whatever tool which you're using. Maybe you're using Topdesk or another app. Everything basically which supports SCIM, which is the provisioning model which Azure AD does. can be connected to Azure AD, and from there let the provisioning do that job, meaning each user which is assigned that particular application will also be provisioned in those third-party applications.
Yeah.
That means basically that if HR is set an account to expire on the 1st of January 2021, that also means that that same account will be disabled on the 1st of January within those third-party web-based apps. And that's great from a security perspective, but also great from a license perspective, because sometimes those third-party tools also cost money. You pay for the active users, and if you don't disable the user, then you have to pay. You pay extra for a user which has left the company. Slack is a perfect example for that.
That's actually underlying the importance of making sure that the reasoning why you should federate or connect all those applications to Azure Active Directory, because it's a transparent process, as you explained, that the provisioning is automatically take care for new users or movers, but even more interesting when you're leaving a company, that the accounts are also terminated or retracted from those SaaS applications.
Yeah, exactly. And then if the app doesn't support provisioning, it's still helpful to connect it to the Azure AD or to the Azure AD to make sure that once that account is disabled in AD, at least the sign-in attempt to that third-party application is blocked because the account is disabled. So provisioning is not mandatory, but if it's there, please start using it, because it's helpful for the process. But making sure that the app is hooked into the Azure AD is, of course, the first important part.
Yeah, but if the applications are connected to Azure AD, you're taking benefit of all the other features Azure AD is leveraging, like multi-factor authentication, as you explained, single sign-on, for example, and many other things, right?
Yeah, and conditional access.
Yeah.
You mentioned already in the terms of MFA, but conditional access is the most powerful thing which you can use once you federated the app or connected the app to the Azure AD.
Yeah, sometimes the people don't getting the point of why Azure AD is that important in this setting. But if you talking about it and explaining it, then it's very clear why it's that important, and also how Microsoft is putting Azure AD. And most people, you might know that sentence, Azure AD as the control plane. Actually, this is the good example of that control plane.
Exactly. Everything is based on an identity which has access to something in this case. So your identity gives you access to your email, but also gives you access to an application. And still your device is important. Nevertheless, that's so true. But without an identity, you cannot use a device. So that's always the first step where you do apply security. And if data goes, of course, to devices, and this is more your part, you'll of course want to make sure that device is secure, that the data which reside on that device is secure. You're making use of the right tools for protecting against viruses and malware. So, but that's 100% true. But identity, it all starts with identity. Then the next slide, and this is more this what we just explained. Just a short recap is building a strong identity foundation, making sure that HR process is in place, and then the next step is connecting those third-party apps, and then you start using the actual identity governance tool which is within Azure AD, by creating an access package or by creating an access review within the access package, And that makes actually sure that you get, so let's say you always start with no access. Then you start in your first role within a company, which is junior finance employee, which gives you just access to 2 or 3 groups out of the 10 which you have. And that grows and it grows. You get into your next role and the next one, and in the end, you still have the access which is applied from day one in your first role, but you're having a totally different role. Maybe you even moved from departments. You're not finance right now, but you're working for HR or do something completely different. Well, whatever, as long as the employee is happy, I'm also always happy. So I don't really mind. But the access still apply, and that's where we need to get in control. And that's not it's. So while we just talked about identity life cycles, we're now going to talk about access life cycles, because same as with the join or move or leave process, we need to make sure that the same is applied for the access, because access does change. And when you're starting to implement least privileged access, you can see that you don't. You start with no access. You get some access in your first role. Maybe you make promotion to the second role of the same department. Your access rights go up, and then you start doing something completely different. And then you can see, as in the image, the access rights are removed again by making sure you just need that access. What is actually needed at that point in time. And this is a very powerful thing, because you can either say the user is going to do the review, or we let someone else do a review.
Yeah, manager, for example.
Yeah, exactly. By the manager of the department or the manager of the user. There are so much choices in there. But that's more about access lifecycle. And when we're going to look about access lifecycles, you're actually going to look at entitlement management within as the product within the Azure AD Identity Governance Blade. And that's where users can actually request access. So you can make an access package which, it was just a random example, which provides you access to a Microsoft Teams team with high confidential information related to HR data. Someone which is working for HR, which do need access, he can request access to that package. And the manager of that access package, or the manager of the user, that's all things which you can determine within an access package, will then approve the access, or he can also deny it, of course. But let's assume that's approved. Then after a year, we can say, okay, that same manager which just approved the access is going to do the review. Does that user still need that kind of access, or is she doing something completely different within the company, and remove him from that access? So that's all what entitlement is about, and how you can make sure that access life cycles are built in the right way. Another great example is, for example, and that's where we sometimes struggle about, Ronny, maybe you know, that's an internal thing. We do work for the same company, and we have a limited amount. We have a limited amount.
We have challenges. I wasn't aware of it, but
we have a limited amount of Visio licenses, and Visio is a perfect example in the most simple way where you can use an access package, because you never need Visio, at least I don't, all days in the year. So you can say, let's review that after a month. And once that month has expired and I don't respond to my renewal, the access to Visio is removed and I'm removed from the license. So also from that point of view, it can bring you cost savings. So it's not only making sure that the right access is applied and people don't have too much access for the work they need to do, but also making sure that you can apply some cost savings.
Yeah, and it's not only cost savings what you're showing here, but it's also you're providing a kind of a self-service, so employees can help themselves without the interaction of IT.
Yeah.
So you can also, from this perspective, you can automate or delegate some processes, like requesting VCO, for example.
Exactly.
So then you don't need to reach out the IT help desk, but then the users themselves can request access to, for example, VCO project or whatsoever.
Correct, and that's via the website myaccess.microsoft.com. So if you're logged on with your Microsoft account right now and you're listening to us, you can go to myaccess.microsoft.com, and that's the portal where you can see the access package which we can create for you. I will show you in a minute the admin portal, but that's where you will go to as an end user, and you can also switch tenants in there by making sure that you can request it within your tenant. But even more powerful, if I'm a guest in another tenant and there are access packages over there, I can also request as a guest access in the other tenant. It's very powerful. So also from a self-service perspective, a great tool, because IT can be more focused on making sure the right access packages are defined and doing some reporting, maybe building some access packages if that's required. But they don't need to have a look at, oh, does that user still need this permission? Has that user left the company? All those kinds of things are not really, should not be maintained by IT. It should be maintained by the business, and you should be, IT should make sure that the business can do their job and is supported in making sure that things are automated in the right way.
I'm getting interesting in it, Pim. So why are you waiting to show us the portal? Let's fire up the Azure portal and show us the goodies.
I will do. So I will stop presenting because I'm just sharing PowerPoint. I will make sure that the right stuff is shared in here. It's this one. Let me know once you see the screen.
Yeah.
Perfect. So I've logged on to portal.azure.com. You can also use the short URL aed.portal.azure.com. It's just whatever you would like to prefer. In there, you click on Azure Active Directory on the left side on the blades. And then here you can already see, shiny as it is, identity governance. And in here you can click on it, and this is all what the identity governance feature will bring you. It's currently, as in today, it's a P2, Azure AD Premium P2 feature. And yeah, entitlement management, mainly focused on access packages, access reviews. And access reviews, not something we talked about much as in just now, but access reviews are more focused on the access is already applied, as in today. How can I make sure that a review will take place on already provided access? Because with an access package, people are going to request access, and with an access review, they already do have access, and I want to challenge the users. Do you still need that access which we applied in the past?
It's an extra check whether they still need the permissions or the rights, or it's kind of an housekeeping.
Yeah, exactly. So if I click new package in here, you would see that there are different steps, and within Lifecycle, I can say I put an access review on the access package. So this is built into the access package. But when I'm going to focus on access which already has been applied, most of us are already using an environment within Azure AD. And yeah, for that, you want to apply an access review for example, making sure that for a group which is used, and making sure that that group is cleaned up, because some users maybe don't need access anymore, or you can think of so much things. Guests, for example, which live in your tenant, as in today already, have access. Why not make an access review for that one, so that those guests at least are removed from having access if they don't need it anymore?
Yeah, can you also make it kind of time related? So if a guest user is living in your tenant but is not signed in for a particular number of days, can you make that access review that it's also querying that's dynamically populating those guest users? You know what I mean?
I think that I know what you mean, but correct me if I'm wrong. What I can say is I challenge the user if he or she still does need access, and if the user doesn't respond or denies the access, I can say disable the account and remove it after 30 days. In simple words, that's what I'm not sure if that's the answer to your question, but that's a feature which is in there. So if you're talking about housekeeping of guest accounts, yes, it's in there. And then on the other hand, besides the access packages and access reviews, you of course got privileged identity management, where you can make sure that people, administrators, need to activate a role before they are going to start using or start executing administrative tasks. And there is a terms of use functionality in here for which you can determine your terms of use.
Yeah, before you're starting your services or a tenant, that someone should agree on those terms. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just saying, well, we secure devices. We're using MDM.
More from a legal perspective that
exactly.
your guests agree with it.
Yeah, people have to accept it, for example, each year, because each year it can be renewed, or they at least have to accept it before they can use, well, that's at least a setting which you can make before they can start using stuff which is connected to Azure AD. And you can say, I put a renewal on it, making sure that the user does it every day, for example.
Yeah. Yeah, so you can enforce it the first time, and secondly, you can update your terms of use and then re-evaluate it by the end user.
Exactly. And that's that is what Azure AD identity governance is all about. But please do know, once this is all implemented, you're not there yet. So I can. The HR process is simply finished. Well, need to be maintained, of course, and making sure that it stays up and running. But if people buy a new app, again, make sure that it's connected back to Azure AD. If there is a new access package needed, you need to create a new access package.
Yeah.
It's not running through it from start to finish. Well, if you're looking at it project wise, yes, that's 100% true. But there is always a review moment in time where you must have a look at, okay.
Actually, it's providing you a framework, but it's not automatically discovering new applications in your environment and say, okay, I'm putting this in subject to identity governance. So you have to maintain it yourself and add those applications under the identity governance scope.
Yeah. 100%.
I think that makes sense. At least it's giving you the tools to configure that identity governance process in the first place, and secondly, maintain it.
Yeah, 100% true.
Yeah.
And the only thing is, and I think that's from my point of view the last thing, I think, which, unless you do have any questions, Ronny.
Yeah, one of the things what you showed us today in this session is don't get me if I'm wrong, but it's mostly focused on cloud. And yeah, many companies are shifting to cloud, but are still in a transition, and they're coming from an on-premise infrastructure. So most, definitely enterprises, are in a hybrid scenario. Can you explain where Microsoft is getting to when it comes to supporting these hybrid scenarios, also identity governance for your on-premise applications?
So, yeah. Yes, I can give you an answer, and I cannot tell you everything. As in today, that's not supported. The thing is, it's focused on cloud groups. But the groups are the source of the group lives within Azure AD. If you're using a synced group, for example, or an app which is not connected to Azure AD, it doesn't pop up within the identity governance pane within an access package. So unfortunately, that's something which is not there. I hope that's coming, but there are more levels where that applies to, of course, because when using a synced group, we need group write back. And well, maybe someone is now triggering who's watching this video. Yes, there is a feature in Azure AD called group write back, but that's for Office 365 groups, not for security groups. And that's actually what this requires to make sure that you can apply that to a synced security group. You can though, because I tried, you can make an access package to the synced group. And it looks like, so at first I thought,
it's working.
It's working. This is funny. I can apply this. But then when you actually request access, you see that the process starts running. And from the moment that the process is running, you can have a look at it and it's saying, this group is not mastered from Azure AD. Unfortunately, I cannot add this user to this group. And then providing that access also fails in the process. So at first I was happy. 5 minutes later, I wasn't so happy.
Disappointed. Yeah, but that's fair enough. I think the first place it's cloud first, and then secondly, hybrid scenarios. I'm guessing it over time there will some developments to support those hybrid scenarios as well. But yeah, it's good to know that the initial focus, if you start using identity governance, is primarily focused on cloud.
Yeah. It's also a good start. So most of the that's how I see it, and nobody has to agree with me, but mostly this isn't organized and is not in the right state. So starting with cloud, starting with literally what is the future, is not a bad place to start with. And once you got that up and running, also you maybe will see that more stuff is going to move over to cloud or services connected to the Azure AD, where you then can apply access packages for. But yeah, of course, I fully agree with you that's not. It will not be the solution for each application or each kind of access which you want to have this in place for. Some stuff, unfortunately, still lives in on-premise data center because that's just how it is.
Yeah, well, let's wrap it up positively. It's a kind of a journey, and it's good to understand what identity governance exists of, what it entails, and then which capability is have to configure it and apply it to your organization. There are so many topics you covered in this session. So I'm sure you will probably in one of our next TechTalk Dudes episodes, getting back in these topics in more details, or did I get it wrong?
No. I think the next session, which we discussed, Ronny, is more focused on your expertise, more than management.
That's right.
Not saying that you're not focused on identity, but don't get me wrong.
No.
But yeah, it's so big that telling you everything about it within just this session in detail is simply not possible. So I think it's good to wrap it up here and continue this in 2021.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward for sure, Pim, and I will definitely attend those sessions with you.
I hope so. I hope so.
Well, thank you. It was very helpful and informative for me. And yeah, as you mentioned, thank you all for watching us. And what Pim mentioned, yeah, next year, 2021, we will continue with a modern management related session. We are still in progress to get also some of the program managers of the Microsoft team on the call on the podcast. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it, Pim, and it was a joy. The first episode. It's a wrap.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks so much, Ronny, for the time you make for this, and yeah, see you next time.
Well, to all our listeners and watchers, thank you very much. Have great holiday season, and looking forward to see you next year. Take care, stay safe, stay healthy. Bye bye.
Bye bye.